Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. It happened in the middle of a crowded restaurant. A birthday dinner she planned for herself, under the pretense of celebrating new beginnings. She invited friends, colleagues, her sister, me, and him. His name was Derek. The man she swore was just someone from work 6 months ago. The same man she claimed was going through a divorce and barely speaking to anyone. Turns out, he was speaking plenty, especially to her. I was already halfway out the door emotionally by the time the dinner came around. But I showed up. Clean shirt, calm face, no expectations, no dramatics. I didn't come to win her back. I came to end the guessing. We were seated at opposite ends of a long table. She made sure of that, said she wanted things to be comfortable. But she kept looking at me between conversations, like she needed confirmation that I still cared. I didn't give her any. Halfway through the meal, when the noise dipped, she stood up with her glass raised, made some speech about growth and choosing happiness. Her voice cracked halfway through, not from emotion, but from the weight of pretending. Then, just like that, she turned to me and said, "I wanted to thank you, Nate, for giving me space, for letting me figure things out." It wasn't a compliment. It was a setup. She wanted to control the exit, paint herself as grateful, the one who matured. Before I could respond, Derek chimed in. Loud, confident. "She prefers me," he said. The room fell into a silence so thick you could hear glasses being set down. I looked at him, then at her. She froze. That wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to be subtle. She was supposed to stay in control. I nodded once. Calm, clear. "Enjoy her," I said. Her expression shifted in real time. What started as a faint smirk turned into something else. Confusion first, then a twitch of panic. The kind that sets in when a performance falls flat and no one claps. She opened her mouth, closed it again, looked around like someone else might fix what had just happened. No one did, because this wasn't her moment anymore. It was mine. I stood up, dropped a 20 on the table, and left without a word. Not because I was angry, because I was done playing roles in someone else's story. The knock came at 9:47 p.m. the following evening. I wasn't surprised. Not really. People like Brooke don't panic in public without trying to fix the optics in private. She needed a cleanup scene, a chance to clarify, to spin the night before into something palatable. I didn't rush to the door. I turned down the music, rinsed my glass in the sink, and walked over slowly. There she was. Hoodie, no makeup, pretending vulnerability. Not the version from last night's show. This was the follow-up performance. I opened the door, didn't invite her in. She asked if we could talk. I leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. Quiet. She started explaining. Not apologizing. Explaining. Said Derek misread the situation. Said she didn't expect him to say that. That she was caught off guard and didn't mean for things to go that way. I nodded once. Let her keep talking. She said things had been confusing lately. That she never meant to hurt me. That she needed time to process everything. Then came the real reason for her visit. She asked if I still loved her. I didn't react. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because everything I felt had already burned off the night before, when I watched her freeze under the weight of her own script. She didn't want love. She wanted reassurance. She wanted to know she still mattered, even if it was in my disappointment. But disappointment needs investment, and I had none left. I told her I was tired, that I had nothing else to say, that everything important had already been communicated, clearly, quietly, when I stood up from that restaurant table and left without a single backward glance. Her jaw tightened. She asked if there was someone else. I didn't answer, not because there was, but because it didn't matter. People like her think answers are currency, that if they just understand the reason, they can rewrite the outcome. But I didn't know her understanding. I owed myself closure, and I'd already given it. She stood there a moment longer, waiting, searching my face for a flicker of the man who used to chase after her chaos. He wasn't home, she said. Okay, almost like a question. Then she walked away. I watched her go without a word, closed the door behind her, locked it without hesitation. That wasn't cruelty. That was peace. It started with a notification. Just her name. She'd watch one of my stories, a short clip from the gym, nothing special. But it stuck out because she never used to care about that part of my life. Then she watched another. then another. Over the next week, I noticed her name more often. No contact, no apology, just silence and presence. Some people would call that harmless. But I've learned, attention without accountability is just control in disguise. Then one morning, I saw her. Not online. In person. I was leaving a small cafe I'd been frequenting lately, one she never once visited when we were together. She'd always said the coffee was too bitter and the music was too slow. But there she was, standing outside with a to-go cup in her hand, looking at nothing in particular. I didn't stop, didn't flinch, just walked past her and nodded once. She didn't speak, just smiled like we were strangers who vaguely recognized each other. That night, she followed 3 people I'd tagged recently, friends she'd never met, lives she was never part of. Suddenly, she was orbiting again, not close enough to crash into me, but always visible. It wasn't love. It was surveillance. She didn't want to come back. She wanted to haunt the version of me that moved on without her. I didn't block her. That would have meant I still felt something. Instead, I did what I'd learned to do best. I ignored it. Fully. Calmly. Without reaction. Because the worst punishment for someone who wants your attention is giving them none. A few days later, she posted an old photo of us on her page, cropped just enough that only those who remembered would recognize the moment. Her caption was vague. Something about time and growth and learning to let go. But it wasn't for her audience. It was bait. I didn't bite. I went for a run. Booked a design client. Cooked dinner. Laughed with people she never met. Slept like I owed myself rest. That night, she viewed another story. Then another. But this time, I didn't even check. Because when you stop chasing ghosts, you stop being haunted. It was a rooftop party. Casual, warm, filled with unfamiliar faces and unfamiliar energy. Exactly the kind of space I never stepped into when I was with her. Back then, I avoided anything spontaneous. Everything was planned, filtered, sanitized for her comfort. My life had to match her rhythm, or at least not disrupt it. Now, I was out on a Saturday night, talking to people she'd never heard of, laughing at jokes she wouldn't understand, drinking something she would have called cheap. I was free. And then she walked in. I saw her before she saw me. She hesitated near the entrance, scanned the crowd like she was looking for someone, and then her eyes locked on me. Her smile flickered, not because she was happy to see me, but because the man she found wasn't the man she left. I wasn't standing in a corner, waiting. I wasn't dressed in the safe neutral she once said suited me better. I wasn't alone. A woman stood beside me, tall, confident, laughing without checking how others reacted. Her presence didn't cling. It existed. Brooke froze for half a second, then slipped into a mask. The same one she used when uncomfortable, shoulders back, polite smile, eyes scanning for control. She walked over like it was casual, like she just happened to be there. But her voice cracked slightly when she said my name. I greeted her like I would a distant coworker. Cordial, calm, forgettable. She asked if we could talk. I didn't move. Just said we were in the middle of something. No apology. The woman beside me, Cassie, smiled, completely at ease. She didn't flinch at Brooke's presence. Didn't pull me closer, didn't compete. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Brooke was used to being the gravitational center. But now, she was just background. She stayed for 20 more minutes. Floated between conversations. Tried to laugh louder than she meant to. Ordered a drink she didn't like. Tried to reclaim the room. But the room had changed. And so had I. When I left that night, I didn't say goodbye to her. I just took Cassie's hand, nodded to a few people, and disappeared down the stairwell. Brooke watched. I didn't look back. Because the moment you stop being someone's option, you start being someone else entirely. She waited 3 days before reaching out again. No calls. Just a message. Can we talk privately? One time. Just you and me. I didn't respond. She followed it up the next morning with a voice note. 40 seconds of practiced sincerity. Said she didn't want drama, just a real conversation. That she owed me that much. That we never had a proper ending. But we did. It just wasn't the one she controlled. Still, part of me was curious, not about her, but about what she thought she'd find. So I said yes. We met at a neutral spot. A small park near the city's edge. Midday. No rain. Nothing cinematic. Just the kind of place where truths land heavy in the open air. She arrived late. dressed like she wanted to be seen, elegant but understated, like she was trying not to look like she tried. I was already on the bench, hands in my jacket pockets, eyes steady. Calm. She sat down, folded her hands, looked at the ground like she was rehearsing the speech in her head one last time. Then she started. Said she'd reflected a lot, that she'd made mistakes, that she never expected it to go this way. She never once used the word sorry. Every sentence came wrapped in soft justifications. She talked about confusion, timing, miscommunication, how we were both hurting. I let her finish. And when the silence came, I didn't fill it. That threw her off. She asked if I had anything to say. I said I already did. She said she didn't hear it. I said she wasn't listening when I left the restaurant table and never looked back. Her eyes flickered. She tried a different tactic. Said she still thought about us. That she remembered the small things, my handwriting, the playlists, the way I brewed coffee. She listed memories like they were evidence of a case she thought she could reopen. But I wasn't on trial. And she wasn't the judge anymore. I told her something simple. You don't get to ask for closure after you created the wreckage. She swallowed hard. Tried to laugh it off. Said I'd gotten colder. I didn't correct her. I had gotten colder. Colder, calmer, stronger. That's what happens when you stop bleeding for people who sharpen their knives behind your back. We stood up at the same time. She reached out, lightly touched my arm. Said, I wish things had been different. I looked at her one last time. They were exactly what you made them. Then I walked away. And this time, she didn't follow. I didn't go looking for updates. But sometimes, they still found me. A friend of a friend. A passing mention. A tag post that floated across my feed. It wasn't gossip, it was context. The slow unraveling of the story she thought she could control. Turns out, Derek didn't last. After the party, after the shift in the room she couldn't reverse, their little flame began to flicker. Whispers said he stopped showing up. Texts left on read. Plans canceled. The typical decline of something built on ego instead of substance. She started telling people he'd changed, that he was distant, that maybe she moved too fast. But no one rushed in to validate her this time. Because something had shifted, not just in her life, but in how people saw her. You can only tell the victim story so many times before people start checking your hands for matches. From what I heard, her sister stopped defending her. A few mutual friends went quiet. The support circle she once used as an echo chamber slowly became empty chairs. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't smiling. I was just still. When you stop centering someone in your universe, their gravity loses its pull. One of her friends, Megan, reached out casually. Said she was sorry for how everything went down. That she always thought we had something real. I didn't reply. Not because I held a grudge, but because that part of my life had expired, and I don't entertain extensions on closed chapters. The next time I saw Brooke was from a distance. Downtown. Late afternoon. She was alone, outside a boutique, pretending to scroll through her phone but clearly not reading anything. That old body language of hers, restless fingers, shifting weight, eyes scanning faces like a radar, looking for familiarity. I didn't stop, didn't hide. I just walked past her. She looked up. Recognition. Then hesitation. Then something colder. Silence. Not mine. Hers. She didn't speak. Because she knew I wouldn't either. There was nothing left to clarify. No audience left to impress. And most importantly, no version of me left to manipulate. That's the quietest kind of justice. Not when people fall, but when they fall, and no one offers to catch them. The envelope was cream-colored. No handwriting, just a printed label with my name. Clean, polished, hollow. Inside was a formal invitation. Brooke's birthday. Same restaurant as last year. Same time. Different tone. It wasn't a message. It was a performance. A last attempt to play graceful. To rewrite the past in front of an audience. If I showed up, it would mean I hadn't let go. If I didn't, she'd still make it about me. He couldn't even be civil, she'd say, to anyone still willing to listen. But the truth? I didn't need to prove anything. Not anymore. I placed the invitation on my desk. Didn't toss it. Didn't frame it. Just let it sit there, unmoved, like my emotions about it. The day came. A Thursday. I worked out early, had 2 client calls, went for coffee with a friend who never knew Brooke. We talked design, books, a new trip she was planning. I listened. Fully. Without my mind drifting. That used to be impossible. By 7 p.m., the time the dinner was scheduled to start, I was already home. Lights low, jazz on, phone upside down. I didn't check social media. I didn't wait for updates. But they came anyway. At 9:22, I got a photo. Not from Brooke. From someone who was there. A table dressed to impress. Candles. Wine. Empty seats. She looked good. Staged. Surrounded by people she used to influence. But the energy was off. Eyes distracted. Glasses half full. Conversation shallow. And next to her? An empty chair. Not labeled. But everyone knew who it was meant for. She had planned a scene. A quiet reconciliation. A show of no hard feelings. Something that could be talked about for weeks after. Did you see how mature she was? But the lead actor never showed. I never gave her that arc. No drama. No refusal. Just absence. The photo faded from my screen. And I didn't reply. Because silence isn't always punishment. Sometimes, it's the only thing loud enough to end a story. She built a table expecting me to sit across from her again. But I'd already eaten. Already healed. Already moved on. And some invitations don't deserve a decline. They deserve dust. People rewrite history when it doesn't serve them anymore. I found out she was doing just that. A former mutual friend, Jen, sent me a message. Said she ran into Brooke at some networking thing. Said Brooke brought me up like I was some cautionary tale. She said you weren't emotionally available, Jen wrote. That you didn't know how to communicate. I read the message twice. Not out of anger, but out of sheer detachment. This was Brooke's pattern. She didn't break people directly. She softened the truth with plausible rewrites until her hands looked clean. But this time, it didn't stick. Jen said something else. I don't think people believe her anymore. The way she talks, it's like she's trying to convince herself. That's the thing about control. Once you lose it, everything you do to get it back just makes it worse. I didn't respond to Brooke's version. I didn't clarify or defend. I didn't jump into comment sections or send texts to correct the record, because I didn't need people to believe me. I just needed to believe myself. And the version of me that let her go that night in the restaurant. He didn't beg for truth to be seen. He lived it. Still, something inside me wanted to be sure the chapter was sealed. So I took one final step. I moved. Not just apartments. Cities. I'd been planning it quietly for weeks. New job offer. New circles. No announcement. No goodbye posts. Just gone. That's the move people don't expect. They prepare for conflict, for reaction, for confrontation. But when you disappear with dignity, you leave them to argue with their own reflection. I changed numbers. Deleted old threads. Switched accounts. By the time Brooke realized I was no longer in orbit, it was too late for questions. And too quiet for comebacks. That was my final act. Not revenge. Not silence, even. Just exit. Clean. Undeniable. Permanent. Because closure isn't something you wait for. It's something you walk toward. And sometimes, the loudest thing you can do is leave no door to knock on. It had been 7 months since I'd left. New city. New job. New rhythm. The kind where peace wasn't something I had to earn every day. It was just there. Built into the silence, the space, the absence of chaos. Then came the conference. Just a 2-day trip back to the city I'd once called home. I almost said no. But it was work, and by now, I didn't flinch at the thought of old places. I didn't avoid her part of town. I didn't scroll through social media, looking for clues. I landed. Checked in. Moved through the day like a man untethered. Until that moment. It was a bookstore. A small one tucked near the corner of 8th and Lincoln. I went in for coffee, not books. Habit. The kind you forget is a habit until it leads you somewhere familiar. She was there. Standing near the nonfiction wall, flipping through something she wasn't reading. Her posture was the same, shoulders forward, feet angled, eyes moving but not seeing. For a second, time compressed. Not because of her, but because of who I used to be when I walked into rooms like that. I didn't freeze. I didn't hide. I didn't engage. I just walked to the counter, ordered my drink, and stood there while she slowly turned around and saw me. She blinked twice. Mouth opened slightly. Then closed. She didn't say my name. She didn't move toward me. But her body told the whole story. She was expecting something. A nod. A word. An old spark. I gave her nothing. Not coldness. Just neutrality. I took my drink, turned, and walked past her without a glance back. Not because I was angry, but because I was finally, entirely free. She watched me go. I felt it. That invisible gravity she once held had turned to dust. She didn't chase. She didn't call. She didn't follow. And I didn't give her a reason to. Because when you build a new life from scratch, you don't owe the past a place in it. Especially not the parts that once tried to define you. 3 days after the bookstore, it came. A message. Short. Measured. Plain. Hey, saw you the other day. Hope you're doing well. That was it. No punctuation. No apology. No attempt to reopen anything. Just those words hanging in my notifications like bait, soaked in nostalgia. I didn't open it. Not out of bitterness. Not out of pride. But because some chapters don't deserve an epilogue. She had years to ask how I was doing. Back when it mattered. Back when I was breaking silently in rooms she never noticed. Back when I was stitching myself together with words she didn't mean and promises she never kept. That version of me. He might have replied. He might have said he was fine. That he'd moved on. That he appreciated the message. But I wasn't him anymore. And I wasn't living in stories where someone else's guilt was the main event. I left the notification there. Didn't delete it. Didn't screenshot it. Just let it fade on its own. Because I didn't need her to know I was okay. I needed me to know I didn't need her to know. It's strange. How healing isn't a moment. It's a series of choices no one applauds. Not answering when you used to chase. Not flinching when you used to fall apart. Not returning to a version of yourself that bled for people who couldn't hold a bandage. That's not revenge. That's restoration. That night, I stood on my balcony. New city. New rhythm. New peace. And I thought about everything she used to take from me. My voice, my time, my clarity. And how I'd reclaimed it all by doing nothing. No speech. No confrontation. No final fight. Just the silence she created, finally working against her. She wanted closure. She wanted acknowledgement. She wanted some echo of the man who used to orbit her every move. But the man who stood there that night, he didn't belong to her story anymore. He belonged to his own. And the final words? They weren't to her. They were to me. You did the hardest thing a man can do. You didn't react. You rebuilt. You left. And you didn't look back. Been through it. When they crossed the line. And you made sure they felt it.